You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we're going to be talking about a test match in India where absolutely nothing has happened. It's a rare one. It's a rare event these days. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Max Rowe Brown. How you doing, Max? Have you enjoyed? I would say nothing has happened. Like, things have happened, but compared to 6,000 wickets,
it's not quite kept up with the pace of the previous three, has it? It's been a bit of a, I guess you could call it an anticlimax, but it's just just meandering along slowly at the pace of a test match, which I guess we're all not used to these days.
Yeah, I mean that I think is when we did the preview show, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days ago. I think we thought it would be a desert. We thought it would be a complete bomb site, and that India rather would stick with the tried and tested tested and passed in most occasions anyway. Game plan. Not to be. Australia racked up 480 in their first innings, thanks mainly to Khawaja. And we reached the end of day two. India 36 for no loss. Max, what are your first thoughts? Do you want to summarise anything? Where do you want to go with this discussion on cricket?
Well, I suppose we should start with the obvious, which would be Uzi Khawaja. I think he pretty much epitomised the entirety of that first innings, didn't he? With his 611-minute vigil. 10 hours he batted for. 10 hours.
That is it's
almost 2 days.
It's quite the effort, isn't it? I mean, I feel like he deserved to finally get his double century in this innings. I felt a bit sorry for him falling. What was it? The first ball after tea.
Yeah, it was the most tired wicket I've ever seen. I think it was just like the ball very slowly plodded towards him at the stumps, and he very slowly moved in the way of it and failed to use his bat.
I mean, the whole thing was kind of a bit like that, wasn't it? The ball itself wasn't a particularly. It was quite a tired ball. It was quite a tired decision by the umpire. It was quite a tired sort of walk. It was a tired shot.
Yeah, it really was, wasn't it? It was all just like everyone's had enough now.
But yeah, look, really well batted. I think it's been a terrific series for Khawaja. I mean, I say I think it clearly has been. He's basically made it Australia or India v Khawaja at times. During the three matches, I think in the four matches he's got 3 first innings scores over 50. Has one of the 2 tons for the series. He's the leading run scorer. He talked about having been to India twice and carried the drinks at 8 tests. It would have felt pretty sweet for him, wouldn't it, when he made it to triple figures yesterday evening?
Yeah, absolutely, and he did it. He ground it out for sure. It took him a long old time, but he did it pretty imperiously. You know, it was a really solid, composed performance. Obviously, as we'll get onto and alluded to, the pitch was not quite as helpful for the bowlers as it has been in the first 3, and that made it a lot easier for him to actually just to play like that. And but you know, you've still got to do it. All the players around him didn't do that, but he got his head down. He made sure his defense was rock solid, and any time they strayed onto his legs, he clipped it away a bit of width, punished them, and it was a really measured performance. It wasn't, perhaps that exciting, but it was very impressive, and full credit to him. Like you said, his runs were instrumental in the third test and the victory for Australia there. And we spoke about him being one of the guys that had to stand up if Australia are going to have any hope in this series. And boy has he done that in the last 2 games in particular.
Yeah, I think he's really established himself as probably the best opening bat walking or on the circuit. Yeah, circuit. I guess it's a circuit of some
it's a
description,
touring
isn't it?
circuit,
Yeah,
isn't it?
the touring circuit.
The World Test Championship.
At the moment, I think he's the first guy to 500 runs this year. Since he came back into the team, he's the leading run scorer in Test cricket. He's really having a late career purple patch. An Indian summer, if you will. Is that a pun? I think it's a pun.
Sure.
Is it a pun? What have I done there?
It works. It kind of works. Yeah, I think it's wordplay.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a pun, but it's definite wordplay.
Cam Green, first Test match century. You'd assume first of many as well. He had a few 50-odd scores in the bank before this one. Pretty important time to get it. I mean, it's I do think Australia have got a big score on the board. I think they needed a big score on the board, and when he came in, it was not a given at all that they would end up with a 400+ total, was it?
No, there was a mini wobble, wasn't there? After Smith fell, I suppose. Some of the wickets that fell in that Australia innings they're all a bit weird, weren't they? I mean, Ash, you got to say, we'll get to it. I mean, you give a huge amount of credit to Ashwin.
Yeah, we'll get to Ashwin. Yeah.
But the Travis Head, pretty crap shot. Steve Smith, I mean, it kept a bit low maybe, but I don't know what that was about. Similar for Labuschagne. Anscombe got completely castled. Alex Carey lost his mind. And it was like Australia was sort of architects of their own downfall to a certain degree at that point. And they needed those two guys to stand up. And I think that's the model, isn't it? When you're playing in India, generally you need someone to go big and hope everyone bats around them a bit rather than everyone contributing, I suppose, a reasonable amount. And Khawaja was obviously the man to do that, and Cameron Green staying with him was vital because no one else around him, like I said, really did that. So great for him, great time to come in. And he was a bit more imposing, wasn't he, in the way he played?
Yeah.
Sort of took the fight a little bit back to India. Yeah,
definitely, particularly at the end of day one. I think we'll get onto this. We'll do Ashwin, then we'll talk about Australia's tactics, if you like. But Steve Smith blocked the shit out of it all day on day one.
Yeah.
Like, really, really took his time. And it looked like that would maybe have been slightly counterproductive at one point.
He brought up the dentary.
He did bring up the dentary, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Smith, in blocking the hell out of it, did also provide the conditions for Cameron Green to come in later in the day and cash in, as it were. And Green did. He really did. Make the most of some quite tired Indian bowling at the end of that day, and then built on it this morning to put up a ton. He looks like a pretty phenomenal player, it has to be said. Do you think we should read loads into this and now predict that he'll be top run scorer in the IPL?
I think that's definitely the sensible route to take, Jack. I think this particular experience is pretty much bang on exactly what he'll get in the IPL with a really old spongy red ball on a really flat deck in the sun. Exactly replicates the conditions he will be facing.
There's famously no Jew ever in the IPL.
No, not at all. I mean, he's in the Australia T20 side, he's shown flashes opening the batting, but he's also disappeared fairly quickly. So I think we were agreed at the time that was a rather large amount of money to pay. Yeah. It was a Carl Jamieson Mark II, but I think he's better than Carl Jamieson.
He might be. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. On the India side, I think there are 2 points, and Tim's made one of them in the chat, which is that Akshar was sort of really, really underused by Rohit. But we'll get to that. I think first of all we need to give some credit to Ashwin. 6 for 91 from 48 overs with an economy rate of less than 2. That's not bad going when your team coughs up 480 runs.
That's a cracking effort. That is an unbelievable. Even with Australia not scoring that quickly overall, he was comfortably below that the overall run rate is 2.86. And what did you say Ashwin was like 1.9, 1.92? Yeah. Comfortably. But when Akshar went at 1.67, further highlighting what Tim was just saying. But on a pitch that really wasn't giving them much, you needed all of Ashwin's nous. And I think the thing that best illustrated that was the Cameron Green wicket. If you look at it in isolation, you're going, oh, he's got lucky there. Cameron Green's just tried to sweep one and gloved it behind. But that was sort of on the back of a sustained period of Ashwin bowling a really negative leg stump line to try and stem the flow. And I think it was the first time the sweep came out. And we all know what happens when Australia bring out the sweep. So, yeah, that was it. It was the mental side of the game that Ashwin really excelled at there. And then obviously the last 2 wickets to tie things up were good as well. But, it was his 32nd 5-wicket haul in 92 games. That's outrageous. That's an outrageous record.
He does bowl a lot of overs. It is an outrageous record, but yeah. I think he has also bowled a third of the overs that India have bowled in the last 5 years, which is just insane.
But he's behind. I think he's 3 behind Anil Kumble on the list in 20 fewer games. I don't know what the overs are, but it's still mind blowing.
Well, I'm sure actually back in the day, Kumble bowled a pretty large chunk of India's overs, especially at home. So maybe that's sort of roughly comparable. It's fantastic. It was another display. I mean, I think it's sort of easy to say it, but it is a point that is worth making. Those kinds of spells, or like a spell, was it? Those repeated spells, that effort from Ashwin, I think is worth far more to a team than any of the bowling that he did in the first 3 tests. Yeah, where I think there's probably 20 off spinners in the world that would have taken wickets, maybe not as rapidly, but within range of what Ashwin was doing. I don't think there's anyone really that gets 6 for 91. Or that you could
on this deck,
or that in a way you're not really surprised that they got 6 for 91. It's it's perfectly possible for someone to blag a fifer.
Yeah, I think what's surprising is that it was in 91 from 47.
Yeah. That's incredible. But also that if anyone was going to do it before the match, if someone told you these would be the scores, and they'd be like, now match the bowler's name to the bowling figures. You 100% pick Ashwin for those figures, don't you?
Yeah. Are you 100% picking Umesh Yadav for 0 for 105?
Yeah, probably are as well. I felt a bit sorry for Umesh. I don't think
there's nothing there, was there?
There was an awful lot there, apart from with the kind of very new ball, and actually, even with the new ball, although there was a little bit of movement, it didn't look necessarily easy to control. No. And
actually, the spinners were probably more dangerous with the new ball, weren't they? Because that was when there was actually a bit of grip.
And it was pretty easy to score. I think we saw a couple of bursts of run scoring from the Aussies with Head up front, and then Cameron Green and Khawaja in the last 10 overs of yesterday. And actually, even this morning, Todd Murphy and Nathan Lyon, not bizarrely, but continued the trend and were able to score reasonably well in a handy partnership to put the Australia score up to 480. Max, we're up to a few minutes. Let's ask a couple of questions though to each other, or I'll ask you. Akshar Patel, do you think he was under-bowled, particularly maybe on day one? I think he only bowled 12 overs on day one. He picks up 1 for 47 from his 28. Or do you think that fate was written, if you like, that this pitch just meant that this was what was going to happen?
You think it's the universe balancing itself?
Yeah.
It's a symptom of the bowling lineup and the side that's been picked. You've got Jadeja and you've got Akshar Patel. You're probably going to go to Jadeja first, and that's, I think, just. Yeah, basically the reason for that is that you've picked 2 left-arm spinners, and they're not that dissimilar. I mean, obviously Akshar's a bit taller and gets that one to go on with the arm a bit more, but they're not wildly different in what they're going to offer you. So I think that's the reason, and it's a reasonably valid reason. On the face of it, you could argue that Akshar probably should have bowled a bit more because he did arguably better and was a bit trickier to face, but it's just the way it goes when you've got, like you say, when you've got 2 similar bowlers, you've got to make a choice between them. You're going to go with the senior guy more often than not, and that's where you're like, maybe on a flatter deck where you have the wrist spinner comes into play for something a little bit different.
That's true.
But
Deep. That's what they should have done.
Kuldeep Yadav, yeah, continue the redemption arc of Kuldeep Yadav. But it would be stupid to sit here and say, oh, they should have picked a wrist spinner. But it's because of how well it's gone in the first three, and we all expected the pitch to do similar things, and it hasn't turned out like that. But I think it's just that's where if you had a point of difference, you might see a bit more bowling from the other player. But when you've got that much similarity, it's just the way it goes sometimes.
I don't think he. I think he was maybe a little bit underbowled yesterday. I don't think he was that underbowled overall. He bowled 28 overs in the end, which is only 7 fewer than Jadeja. And Jadeja has been eating Australia for breakfast on this tour, and for lunch and for dinner, and he's been snacking in between. It's been
he's gonna have to go on a diet after this.
He bowled more than Umesh Yadav as well. I think Aksha basically did his job. 28 overs, 47 for 1. He kept it really tight in the overs he did bowl. You have to remember further mitigation in favour of Rohit there, who I will say I don't think is always the most inspirational captain, but not inspirational, but tactically versatile captain.
Yeah.
I think to go back to the T20 World Cup, because people will say, oh no, he's really, really versatile. He wins loads of things. Didn't he get 3 games in a row just use the same bowlers in the same order?
Yeah.
That isn't versatile. For all of his other strengths, but I, as a bit of a mitigation, and to say to Rohit, I don't think he did that bad a job. For 146 of the overs, Usman Khawaja was at one end, left-handed, looking relatively untroubled. If he's a very good player of spin, that's probably a matchup he's really going to like. And if you have a pitch without a lot of variation in terms of, or natural variation in terms of whether it will spin or will go straight on, Akshar Patel is just not that threatening a bowler. I think to a player of Khawaja's calibre. I mean, had it been a right-hander, I think he might have bowled a bit more and had a little bit more success in terms of the wicket column. But we don't always talk about matchups in Test cricket. That was a bad one, I think, for Jadeja and Patel. Like, the conditions weren't there. And I
mean, the overall matchup between bowler and batter wasn't that favourable, was it?
No, yes, exactly. I mean, you just have to have a look at sort of what's happened for evidence of that. Max, we're going to take a break. Then you're going to tell us about Manscaped, and then we're going to talk about what might happen next and whether Australia scored too slowly. And if you've got any questions and you're watching on YouTube, well, first of all, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit subscribe, keep the channel growth going. We've seen some really impressive numbers during the series, and we want to keep that up. And a big thank you to everyone that's sort of bothered to turn up today. It's one of our less well watched shows of the series, but thanks for being here. Drop a question in because we'll have a little bit of time for that. Ready for the break, Max?
Ready.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Crickets Podcast, where we're midway through our discussion about the first couple of days of the 4th Test between Australia and India. We're going to talk a little bit about what we think might happen next. Are we on for a bore draw? And so on. But first, just a little plug for our Patreon, patreon.com/thecricketpod, where you can support the show directly. Some more bonus content went up today, so ideal time to sign up. Max, we're also sponsored by a company that make ball shavers and pants.
Yes, we are.
Manscaped.com. And it's funny to boil down their product to ball shavers and pants.
But it's an accurate description.
But it is an accurate description. They're a male grooming company. We like them. They sent us some product, and you're going to tell us a little bit more about that now.
Absolutely. So, boxers, yes, pants and ball shavers. We have the Lawnmower 4.0 and we have the Boxers 2.0. 2 years Manscaped has spent developing the most comfortable boxer briefs there are. 2 years. That is time well spent, and it will take your balls to the royal ball throne.
Yes.
So just after you've finished grooming yourself with the Lawnmower 4.0, which is the best trimmer out there for below the waist grooming, you can slip on your lovely new Boxers 2.0 with its micro-modal fabric that's buttery soft and breathable to keep your cucumber cool. You've got You've got the front fly opening with easy access, and actually, you know, from El Hef to Nighthawk, Stuart Broad.
El
Your
Jefe, come
boys,
on.
El Jefe to the Nighthawk, Stuart Broad. Your boys will be in the right hands. So yeah, head over to manscaped.com and use the code Cricket Pod, 20% off and free shipping, and you'll be happy. You will be happy. I guarantee it.
Yeah, and I can pretty much guarantee that as well. I've enjoyed my time in the Manscaped boxes. Use the code CricketPod for 20% off at manscaped.com and free shipping. You know,
Very important.
there we go. Max, the game's set up in a way which makes it look like a draw is quite probable in my mind. India are 444 behind with 3 days to play. Can you tell me if my diagnosis of the situation is accurate or whether you would disagree?
We didn't even consider the prospect of a draw on the show the other day, did we? Didn't even enter our minds. But it's probably where the sound money is. Australia have taken so much time out of the game with their 480. You know, it wasn't a quick 480. It took them all but 10 of the overs left in day 2 to get there, which means that if India want to win the game, and this is where it does get a bit interesting, because they need to win to 100% secure their place in the World Test Championship final. Yeah. If they want to win the game, they're going to have to bat a bit quicker than Australia and try and get, I don't know, 150 lead. I mean, that would take some doing, wouldn't it? Over 480. But you know, if they bat at pace, then there's a chance. The pitch still looks pretty good. There was a 10 over burst this evening, which Australia had, and they didn't look remotely troubled. Rohit and Shubman Gill, and they're both very capable of scoring quickly. So there is a chance, but I think, you know, India winning is probably the least likely outcome, and a draw probably is the favourite. And I think it's sort of worked out by accident in the way Australia have played. I think it didn't work out, but they didn't take any wickets. But having 10 overs left tonight to have a go at them at a very tired India side is probably the ideal situation. But it didn't look to me, the way they were approaching it, that they had any intention of, you know, declaring to get to that point. And it just so happened that the last 2 batters ended up losing their wickets in a way that allowed that to happen. But there was one over after they took the new ball this in the afternoon session where Nathan Lyon went on the attack, and you thought, okay, here we go. They're going to try and blast a quick 30 and then declare. But after that over, they then just stopped trying to score runs and just basically let Ashwin take the last 2 wickets.
Yeah.
So it was all a bit weird, the way it came to a conclusion. But in the end, it sort of worked out in the way they wanted. But yeah, as I say, so much time taken out the game is going to take a real effort for India to win it. And I think ultimately it will probably just be a case of India will try and bat for 2 days and there'll be a day left and that'll be it.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be really critical, it's hard to be critical of a team that got 480, especially when they've been skittled out in almost every other innings they've played in the series. Even when they won the test, they still looked quite iffy at times. So yeah, I don't want to be like, oh, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. That's a lot of backseat driving. But 480 off 167 overs on a pretty flat deck was slow, and I think it does. I think to the extent where had they got 450 in 30 overs less, they are far more likely to win the match, far less likely to draw it. But I don't think India
also more likely to lose it.
Well, I don't think India will gain substantially. So at the moment, this is what Google says. Google says 25% Australia, 58% draw, 17% India, which I think is about right. It might be slightly overestimating India there, because I think India would have.
I think it probably is, but yeah,
India would have to bat for 2 days to get. I went. We'll talk about the scenarios where India win in a second, but if we look at Australia and did they bat too slowly, I would say yes. I reckon if they'd got 30 fewer, but took some risks, and they've used 20 overs fewer, that gives them an extra session basically to bowl at India, assuming India don't bat for 2 days. And that scenario, the scenario for India to win doesn't change that much in the 30 runs and the 20 overs. So India still have to bat for absolutely ages in their first innings to have a chance of winning. And even then, they might not. Like even then, Australia have still got like massive agency in the match. Long story short, I say 25-58 for Australia win and draw. I reckon had Australia been a bit quicker, they could have had a 35 or a 40% chance of winning. But we are where we are, and I don't think any of the Australians are going to worry about that. They'll still think
you're not going to sniff at it. If someone says like after day 2, you're going to be 450 runs ahead, no one's going to go we'll take our chances.
We'll take a risk. I like it's quite a small tactical thing. The one player I would attribute some blame to, and we haven't done too much of that in this series, is Steve Smith. 38 off 135 balls. I said it helped set up Cameron Green, and I think it did, but he scored. He was really tedious to watch, and I think.
And Cameron Green only scored at 60 odd.
But he scored quite quickly in the evening, though. That's what I mean. Yeah. I think Smith. I don't really see what Smith was doing. I mean, like at the end of the day, Khawaja talked in his post-match interview, and he said the game plan was to make India get us out, so we weren't going to hit the ball in the air or do anything exciting. Basically, we just knew that it would be very hard to get out, so we'd wait for the scoring.
No one told Alex Carey the game plan then.
But I think Smith just took it to an extreme that it didn't need to be taken to.
Like, he's quite an extreme bloke, isn't he? So I can see how he would have just taken that and run with it.
I think Smith is better when he bats, more normally. And it wasn't a wicket, I don't think, where you couldn't score. I'm not saying go out there and basball it. I'm saying score at 3 runs and over. And he's scoring at 1.5 runs and over. It's an extra 20 runs. And I think he's less likely to get out. I mean, the way he got out was weird. He just hit a ball that was outside off stump. Short and outside off stump. Just put his bat there and played on. So I don't know. I think he could have been. I think they could have been a little bit more, aggressive there. But from an Australia point of view, it's sort of window dressing on what I think has been a pretty good effort, near the top of what they were. I think
the thing is, if it's someone, I used the Dentry as the example, but if it is someone, like Joe Denley batting at 3, who isn't anywhere near the caliber of Steve Smith, you can be like, okay, I understand the job you've done there, and it sort of makes sense. But when you are Steve Smith and you are that good at cricket, it is a bit confusing. Yeah,
I still think so. How can India win this match? I think this is an interesting debate as well. My scenario, Max, and I think this must be really the only way they can do it. India bat for the next 2 days, more or less, and they score about 3 and over, which would get them 540 more runs. Plus the 36 they've got on the board, which is a 100-run lead going into day 5.
Australia capitulate.
They need to then hope that the pitch deteriorates fairly substantially, not a little bit of up and down, like really
breaks up.
Breaks up. Yeah. And they need to hope that this happens sort of late on day 4 as well, so that they don't end up getting
overnight.
They don't want to get to 300 and then it breaks up on day 4 and then they're bowled out for 350. Australia slog it around and India need 200 on day 5. That's a bad scenario. They need it to break up at exactly the right time. Then they need to bowl well and hope Australia batted like they did in Delhi. Now I think that all of these things are possible. It is possible that the pitch deteriorates. It is possible that India bat for 2 days. It is possible that they score more than 3 and over, say, and have a bigger lead. But it's a pretty tough ask. Is there any other way that they can win this game, or do you think it's realistic to have hope if you're an India fan?
The only other way I see it going, potentially in India's favour, is perhaps they score a little quicker than 3 and over, and they score 480, and it becomes a 1.5 day 1 innings shootout, and it maybe breaks up a bit or not that much, and Australia sort of lose the plot against someone, maybe Akshar Patel, Get bowled out for 150, and India have got a chase on in half a day on day 5. That would be a very exciting finish to the game. But I think that is the other possibility. Obviously, you'd caveat that with the fact that India would have to chase on the final day, and you would expect some deterioration because it does happen like this quite a lot. You get a really good pitch to bat on for the first 3.5 days, and then it very quickly, breaks up and gets dry and starts turning. And with Nathan Lyon in the Australia side, that's going to be a tough ask to chase sort of anything on a final day if the pitch gets worse. But I think that's another scenario that you could see. I think probably a risk that's a more 50-50 scenario, isn't it? If it gets to that point.
I think it's an interesting test as a whole in that it is a bit of a throwback to test matches from 10 years ago in these conditions. And actually,
exactly what we were talking about with Dan the other week as well.
Yeah, and actually, well, I think Australia have got enough runs that this doesn't necessarily apply. But there's sort of an incorrect view on those matches that batting first is a huge advantage, when in actual fact that tends not to be the case. Like actually batting second, you have more chance of winning the match. But also you're basically because you're able to control the tempo of that final innings.
It's almost a bit like chasing in
it is. It becomes a little bit like that. What we've seen in test matches where the draw fades out of the game, so the shorter the match, actually it tends to be that batting first becomes an advantage again because you get all the things that are related to deterioration and so on. But if the draw is realistic and you are the last team to bat, then you have two options: you can bat for the draw or you can bat to win. Which really depresses the chances of the team batting first winning. Now, I think Australia might have gone past the point at which that is a big factor. I think had they got around 400, I think India might have been favourites. Which is why that innings between Murphy and Lyon was actually quite pivotal. I think.
Really important.
I think it was really, really important, much more important than people gave it credit for at the time. I think at the time people were like, "Oh, this is a bit of fun. A couple of tail enders."
Well, it was on the level of what Akshar and Ashwin had been doing in the first 2 games.
But I think it really depressed India's chances of winning. Interestingly set up though. Like we haven't seen one of these matches for a while, and it is an interesting one. I suppose we should, with that in mind, give our judgment on the pitch. Are you happy with the pitch, Max? You wanted carnage before the game?
Yeah, I didn't get carnage. I wanted carnage and I haven't got it. So I've got to say I'm a little disappointed.
Okay.
It's nice to see something different from the first 3 though, isn't it? It's perhaps maybe too far in the batter's favour this time, but we can't be too picky. And there's still 3 days to go. So, it could very quickly become, better for the bowlers, and it would be really interesting. You don't want it to be a pitch where it's basically win the toss and win the game.
Yeah.
But I don't. It still looks good. I think it's fun. It's nice to give the batters an opportunity to stamp their mark on the series after the first 3 games.
My view in general in Test cricket is it is better if there is a chance of the draw happening. Like if the game is only going to go for 3 days, I think that the format as a whole displays its limitations. I think that'll mean there's a lot of luck involved.
It's basically just a 2 innings 1 day international.
Yeah, it can become a little bit like that. There's usually quite a lot of luck. It usually massively favours the stronger side, so it makes it a little bit boring. It usually massively favours the home side, and often that is the stronger side, but because of relative ability and conditions. Yeah. So I think it can be a bit tedious. I would rather see, if you're going to get it wrong from a curator point of view, I would rather it was a little bit too flat like this. Than it was going to be over inside 3 days. I just don't.
Especially if you got a ticket for day 4.
Well, for sure. And I think as well, it doesn't. Some of this cricket was a bit dull to watch, and I think everybody would. Like if you're asking what is more exciting, 28 wickets in 2 days or 10, then obviously 28 wickets is more exciting. But
not for the purists, though.
It's not so much for the purists, but it does make you question, like, what's the skill involved in the 28 wicket test? It does sort of undermine some elements of what's supposed to happen and what the point of the format is. So yeah, if you're going to get it wrong, and I think the point I was going to make before I lost my train of thought, it would have been possible, and it will be possible for the teams to use a different batting strategy to try and win this match. Like, it is not necessarily a foregone conclusion that India score at 2.5 and over for 2 days and this becomes a board draw. They could score at 5 and over tomorrow. Like, if they want to, if they think we really want to try and win this match, there's nothing stopping them trying to put 450 up tomorrow, and that would be an interesting.
And I think they should, because Sri Lanka are looking good against New Zealand. There's a bit of danger. As
Bazball has shown, it's only the conventions of the game that really limit the use of strategies like that. Like on this pitch, if you think the Rohit and Gill and Kohli and Akshar and Jadeja have got it in their locker to score at 4.5 and over, why don't you go and do it? Shreyas Iyer. Like they probably all do, don't they? I mean, it's only Pujara in that order, and even Pujara at home is not a slow scorer necessarily, but it's Pujara is the only one that sticks out as somebody who isn't a quick scorer or couldn't be a quick scorer. So if you were an India fan, or if you were in the India dressing room, it would be an interesting tactic to try and use here. We saw England do it quite successfully on pitches which were quite flat.
And on a pitch like this, you can probably go for one of the Aussie spinners.
Yeah,
like Kuhneman or Murphy, you can probably hit them off their lengths.
Sure.
And then it's a bit tricky.
Max, last thing we need to talk about before we wrap up is Narendra Modi and Albanese driving around the pitch on a giant micro scooter. What were your thoughts on this? We've left it to the end, so people can switch off now if they want. But it's very difficult to not address one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen on a cricket pitch. This includes the fat guy who got stuck under the sight screen at the end of today's play as well. Like, it was like slapstick. It was like a wacky races event with two world leaders. With their alleged bumper crowd, which turned out to be about 50,000.
There's no one there.
Yeah.
There's no one there.
It was.
The bus gets stuck. What happened?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the overriding feeling for me was that it was just extremely funny.
Like I don't find it angering because it's too stupid.
Yeah, it was incredibly sort of. I mean, almost a childish display.
I'd file it under Boris Johnson stuck on a zip wire.
It was a bit like that. It was like that idiot stuck on a zip wire. I call it what it is. I mean, I think it was an attempt to. They pumped it up as an attempt to show off the big new stadium with the biggest crowd ever and do some ostentatious ruling. Basically, not really leading, was sort of definitely under the ruling camp. The way that day it was curated, and I think I just thought it was very funny that the pair of them were wheeled around the outfield, looking like
a couple of geriatrics.
They were
on their mobility scooter.
It was like the world's biggest mobility scooter, dressed up like a cricket-themed Iron Throne, as you called it. Like a kind of knockoff Roman emperor. So
I love that. I do.
It was absolutely hilarious, and I'm glad. I'm glad, to be honest, that it blew up in everyone's faces.
To witness it. Yeah.
I do think there are some serious points you can make about that, and I think we made them on the last podcast. But as a spectacle, that was embarrassing. Anyway, Max, pleasure to talk to you as usual. Let's call it a day.
Absolutely.